Morning, everybody. I think that's everybody admitted from the lobby. So I'm going to make a start as we're recording this, and anybody who comes joins later will be able to catch up with that first couple of minutes. But welcome everybody to the service design deep dive for the community-based debt advice grant scheme. My name's Erica Helps. I'm the debt commissioning lead here at MAPS, and today's session is the first of a series of 4 deep dive sessions which are taking place between now and Christmas. So we've got quite a lot to get through today, so if we can get straight on to it. So if you just take us to the next slide, thanks. So just a usual reminder, please do use the meeting chat for any comments, questions or clarification throughout the session. If you could keep your cameras off during the presentation, microphones are muted for the moment, and we'll open up for live questions at the end if time allows, and invite you to come on camera then if you'd like to. The session's being recorded. Both the recording and the slides will be shared afterwards. So if we can go on to what we're covering today. What we're covering this morning, as we do see new faces at each of these sessions, we'll do a very quick recap and update on the community-based debt advice grant scheme and where we've got to so far before we move on to our approach to service design, including the legislative and regulatory frameworks and the MAP standards. We'll also cover service design examples and provide our feedback and reflections based on your questions and your comments, which were provided in response to our recent community-based debt advice survey. We'll also then go on to cover a little bit more about the support that's available from MAPS. So as we've said, do note any questions that you have for the Q&A section in the chat so that we can get to as many questions as we can. So let's start with that brief recap and latest updates on the community-based debt advice scheme. We'll revisit the principles and decisions that have guided our approach so far. So our guiding principles essentially are about long-term funding for stability. We're looking at an initial 5-year grant term plus up to a further 4 years, so 9 years in total. We intend to take in the time that we need to get things right, making sure that we're drawing on sector expertise, but doing it in a way that's managed and sustainable over time. We're wanting to make sure that we are transparent and fair in the process that we're applying and the decisions that we're making. So sharing those with you as far as we can, when we can. We're making sure that in terms of the value that we place on our community-based services, it's about more than just volumes, appreciating the difference that community-based services bring to clients and to partnerships. So really interested in investing in those trusted relationships, both our relationships with you, but also your partnerships with each other and with referral partners locally. We're really interested in making sure that over the lifetime of these grants, we are strengthening that debt advice ecosystem for the benefit of both clients and communities. We're really interested in seeing kind of diversity in terms of the people who are delivering the services, but the ways in which services are also delivered for the benefit of clients. So really interested in kind of different approaches in delivering that community-based debt advice. But the biggest thing for us is about making sure that we are aiming to meet you as a sector where you are now, focusing on incremental change, leveraging the strengths of existing community-based services. So those are the principles that have shaped these key decisions so far. So our key decisions so far are about making sure that this is grant funding for community-based debt advice, so not contracts. We've decided after kind of reviewing all of the evidence base that grant funding is the right way to go for community-based services. Which looking at changing our current funding approach, so previously we've had 4 standard grant agreements and looking at transitioning those to more locally appropriate approaches. So that funding is going to be geographically based with a grant lead in each area, either a single organisation or a consortium, supported by strong local delivery partners. We're running a competitive grant application process that will follow best practice in public procurement. We've committed to sharing our application criteria and weightings before the grant competition opens so that you can help you can understand and help shape that application process, making sure that it's proportionate and that you understand the questions you're being asked to respond to before we launch that grant competition. We also understand that there are differences in cost for serving some of those with additional or particularly complex needs. And whilst we want to understand why you've made the choices you've made about delivering your services, we very much care about kind of maximising the choice that is available for customer access to appropriate high quality debt advice which meets their needs rather than just the lowest cost. So our grant application process will be staged with opportunities for feedback and dialogue to help refine proposals before final submission. So in terms of the most recent updates, the next slide, please. There we are. We shared our proposed approach to geography and lotting last week on October the 28th. That is subject to final governance. So we set out in a video which has been published on our website that we intend to let 15 lots, both a mix of regional and sub-regional grants. There'll be 2 rounds of competition. The first round in spring 2026 will be for East Midlands, Yorkshire and Humber, the North West and the West Midlands. And the second round, launching in spring 2027, will be for London, North East, East of England, South West and the South East. Over the summer, we talked to you about delivery models A, B and C. Feedback on those is still under consideration as to how best we ensure that collaboration between leads and their networks is built into any approach over the lifetime of the grant agreements. Also to say that all previous webinars are available on that community-based debt advice page at maps.org.uk. These are accompanied by supporting materials and will continue to publish information to that page. I'd also like to say thank you at this point to those who've given us early feedback on the microsite and to encourage anyone who hasn't seen it so far to take a look. It's really useful, host of lots of useful information. We'll post the link in the meeting chat. So in terms of where we are in the process, just a quick overview in terms of our timeline. From December 2024 through till February of this year, we undertook our initial market engagement and feedback surveys. Between July and September of this year, we did another extensive round of market engagement, a couple of webinars, a launch of an information pack and 9 regional in-person events. Those were followed by a survey which has brought about a lot of the content that you will see over the upcoming deep dives in November and December on service design, customer experience, mobilisation, data and evidence. As I mentioned on the webinar last week about the geography and lotting approach, we're also planning to undertake an expression of interest process in December 2025, and we'll come out with more information about that shortly. Between January and March, we'll be holding sessions on eligibility criteria and bid preparation and some further support around market development. And then in spring 2026, the competition round opens for those round 1 areas. So at this point, having taken you through the kind of story to date, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Fee, who will take us through a lot of the content for today's session. Thanks, Fee.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. For those who don't know me, I'm Fiona Haig. I work in our policy team here at Money and Pension Service, and I've been looking at some of the work around service design. And I'm afraid you're going to hear quite a lot from me this morning, but we'll try and break out with some different voices as we go through. And just a reminder to please do post any questions in the chat as we go. So when we're talking about service design, we shared some material in the info pack. This is just a little replay of it, but when we're thinking about service design, we're looking at these 3 areas essentially. So the clients who are using your services, the people you've got involved in your workforce delivering those services, and the processes and the tools that you are using to make those services happen. So these are the sort of concepts that we're covering today. And when we do that, we're not working from an entirely blank piece of paper. There's a legislative and a regulatory context that we're working in, particularly around debt advice. So the Money and Pension Service was set up by a piece of legislation that sets out all the things that we have to do. We work in the area of debt advice. One of the functions that we have is to provide debt advice in England. And as you will all know, debt advice is a regulated activity. So the FCA is the organisation that sort of defines and sets out various things about what constitutes debt advice. So those are the kind of two kind of frameworks that we're working within. The legislation that created MAPS, as well as saying we have to provide debt advice in England, says we have to set some standards, and those standards apply to all the services that MAPS delivers, including the debt advice services. So I'm just going to hand you over briefly to my colleague Kelly from our customer experience and quality team, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about the MAPS standards.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fee. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Rolls, and I'm a lead quality manager within the customer experience and quality team here at MAPS. So this slide explains a little bit about the legal foundation for what MAPS does and how the standards fit in with that. The Financial Guidance and Claims Act 2018 gives MAPS a clear statutory mandate to do three things: to develop and implement standards for debt advice, money guidance and pensions guidance, to monitor how those standards are being met, and to enforce compliance where needed. The FCA has approved these standards and will review how well MAPS is meeting its obligations. Their findings are reported back to MAPS, DWP and the Secretary of State. So the first triennial review of these standards was completed in summer 2024, and one of our main priorities for 2025 and 2026 is to respond to those findings and recommendations. As part of that, an updated version of the MAP standards was published in October 2025, reflecting what we've learned and where we continue to strengthen quality and consistency across services. So this slide focuses on an overview of the updated MAP standards, which are now grouped into three key categories that reflect the full service journey. So standards 1 to 3 focus on designing services and creating capability. This is all about how organisations set up for success, from building the right infrastructure and governance to developing the capability and skills needed to deliver high quality support. Standards 4 to 6 move more into the delivery of services. These cover what happens day to day when supporting customers, ensuring that advice is accurate, appropriate, and provides good outcomes for customers. And finally, standards 7 to 10 are more around managing the service. Things like performance management, continuous improvement, and insurance activity to maintain quality and compliance over time. So together, these 10 standards provide a clear, structured framework for understanding and improving how services are designed, delivered, and managed across the sector. And then next slide. So this slide outlines the phased approach we take in to implement the new MAP standards. So following the FCA approval and publication of the updated standards, the next key milestone is the launch of our detailed toolkits, which will come in November, December time. These toolkits will set out the minimum level of compliance expected under each standard and provide practical guidance to help services understand what compliance looks like in practice. Then, moving into January and February 26, we'll begin a broader programme of MAP standards improvement activities and onboarding. This will include engagement sessions, training and support to help organisations embed the new requirements effectively. The full go live for the standards is planned for April 26, marking the point when the updated framework and assurance activity will come fully into effect. However, recognising there will still be an embedding period for existing services. Overall, this phased approach is designed to give services time to prepare, build, understanding, and make the transition smoothly and confidently. Back to you, Fee. Thank you very much.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Kelly. And we've posted the link to the standards, that new version of the standards in the chat. If you could just take us to the next slide. So what we're going to do for the next section is take you through some of the content that we shared in that information pack in the summer. We asked some questions, we got some feedback on that, and that's going to be sort of driving all of the remainder of this session. So we shared this with you in summer, but just to kind of reiterate. So when we're thinking about service design, we think about those three things: clients, people, and processes. We've gave some examples around the things that we think are really important, but it's really critical that we make sure our MAP standards, sorry, if you just go back a slide, please. Yeah, the MAP standards, because they say so much about service design, it's really important that they're considered as sort of part of the process that we're going to be going through when we think about the service design for our community-based services that we're going to be funding through this new grant scheme. So we want to make sure services are really aligned with the MAP standards. Well, we also are really mindful of some of the things Erica was mentioning earlier that are driving this program, about making sure we've got local knowledge, local networks, local expertise embedded in delivery. And we recognize that that means that, there might be diversity, different approaches. We want services that are tailored to local needs. Needs aren't the same everywhere. So that means that, we're expecting this grant scheme to have a kind of level of diversity, aiming for the same outcomes, but different ways of delivering things. And that reiterating some of what Kelly was talking about, that's in the standards around continuous improvement, that we expect over the lifetime of the grant, that there'll be regular review, refinement, and improvement on some of these areas of service design. So in the information pack we gave you in the summer, gave examples across 6 areas. We're going to run through all of these this morning, but it was things like, reaching clients, being place-based, making advice easier to give, all of these ideas. And we asked you 3 questions. Those 3 questions are, tell us what you want a bit more clarification on. We asked a question, and we're going to revisit this question later on this morning. So think about this question as we're going through. So thinking about these kind of service design areas, are there bits that you would value more support from MAPS on? Are there things that we could be doing that could help build skills and capacity and capabilities to support some of these areas? So bear that in mind as we go through this. And we also asked, we're going to be running the session, tell us what you want us to cover. And this is driving a lot of the content that we're going to go through. So I'm going to start with some of the sort of more general comments that people came back to us with. And we're going to share these slides after this call. I'm not going to read out every single word on the slides. I'm going to try and give you a bit of a flavour of the kind of key points. So we've got some questions about, what content do you want to cover? So as we've said, our duty in legislation is around providing debt advice, and that is the primary purpose of this funding scheme. So that's the kind of main focus, but we're looking for proposals that are going to sort of show how providing debt advice in a community-based setting is done most effectively in the optimal way for the clients that you are supporting. People also asked us for a bit more definition about community-based. And again, we're sort of referring you back to the info pack. In there, we had a set of definition and ambition slides. And one of the slides that talks about the value of community-based services, I think, is a really useful touch point for this. So when we're talking about community-based debt advice, talking about services with a physical presence, we've got local knowledge, it's sort of trusted asset within their communities. I'm not going to read out every single word. Hopefully you're getting the intention. We want to create a level of flexibility, so we're trying not to pin everything down in a really detailed definition, but set a direction of travel. Got a really great set of questions about what's the learning from current delivery. What what works, what do we want to change. I'll say a lot of the organisations, hopefully, who are on this call, who are involved in delivering services at the moment as part of MAPS funding, you're also really well placed to bring your own knowledge and experience of this into the competition and the proposals. We know that there's a lot of excellent delivery happening. We get good quality scores, we've got excellent customer feedback. We know that services are achieving outcomes. But we think, as Erica mentioned earlier, that actually making sure that services that are based in communities are designed by, delivered by, and run by the people who are in those communities and are invested in those services locally is a really effective approach. So that's one of the big drivers, to really get that emphasis on local knowledge. We're a national organisation having to commission across England. We don't think we have the expertise to determine what that looks like. So really, that's again a big driver of this approach. So we're looking for a better focus on kind of closer to the communities, but also trying to look for a bit of a shift in how things are managed. Want to really make sure that we're focusing on the unique value of community-based services, thinking about who's using them as well as how many people are using them. And we want to work in a way that's really kind to build a culture of learning and sharing across the grant, and making sure that these are a partnership where we are working with lead grant holders to support them in the best way possible for the challenges that they are facing. And we got a lot of questions about the extent to which things could be locally tailored within a consistent framework. And that's why we mentioned the MAP standards up front, because that is that common framework that all of our debt services and all of our other services that MAPS provides are working to, but that will give us that consistent framework. But within that, there's opportunities for tailoring locally, so long as those kind of high-level ways of working are established and can be evidenced and checked. So everything's going to be focusing on delivering good quality services, but with an element of flexibility. The next question that we wanted to cover, we got quite a few people asking us about what volumes services should be seeing, and it's always useful in these moments to say, we know there are a lot of people who are in need of debt advice. There are a lot of people seeking help. There's high demand for services, and it's really important for us to try and make sure that we are helping as many people as possible, but we want to make sure that that support is effective. We want to make sure that things are working well for clients. So we want to be working with people who share our ambition to help as many people as possible, but we recognise there are some budget constraints there. We want services to be effective, and that volumes is not the only part of the puzzle that we're interested in. Outcomes and the value add are really important too. A little plug that we will be doing a deep dive that will go into data and evidence in a bit more detail on the 4th of December. But basically, we're expecting to have a very similar approach to the approach that we have now. That is, our lead organisations will be expected to set out the impact they expect to achieve, and that will include client volumes as well as other measures. We also got some questions about the fact, or questions about how to make sure that clients are truly supported. And again, we know that this is not an easy thing to do. We've got lots of research, some examples I've put pictures of here, but we'll make sure the links are available. Lots of evidence that engaging with advice is really difficult. Sticking with the advice process is really difficult. clients have got lots going on, experiencing different vulnerabilities over and above being in debt. So we know that you know, this is not a sort of easy process for people to follow. Absolutely, we want services to work for clients. So if you're finding that, you know, the way that things are being delivered isn't working for clients, then, you know, that's something we'd expect and be interested in being picked up through that service design approach, through that refinement, through that iteration, to try and make sure that you're looking at the evidence, understanding what is and isn't working, and trying to put clients at the center of the process and design things that are going to be effective, flexible, and tailored for them. You know, within that, we're sort of saying, you know, tell us in your proposals when we get to that stage how you're going to do that. But within that, you know, we recognize not every client is going to complete a full journey, and we'd expect organizations to have appropriate processes in place to help them manage those kind of issues. I'm going to move now from those generic comments into some of the more specific ones. So what we're going to do is I'll reference the kind of examples that we gave, and then we'll move on to the questions that were related to that. And apologies if people are sort of picking up a bit of background background as I am in the office today, which is quite busy, which is which if you do hear something, apologies for that. So on to our service design examples. The first area was around reaching clients, and what we set out in our example was around how we'd expect lead organizations, each grant, to have an approach, to have a strategy, to be using that local knowledge and local insight to determine how to target the service locally. So you know, we'd expect within that some level of knowledge of local supply, local demographics to be applied. And we'd expect people to be monitoring and iterating that through the life of the service. So if we move on to the questions we've got in this area. So people asked us for a bit more clarity on target audiences. And I'm going to reiterate some of the stuff that we've shared previously. So taking everything we were just talking about how difficult we know it is to engage with debt advice, we've said that we want services to be open to all. We don't think having a you know, sort of set of eligibility criteria up front is an effective approach. We want you know, we want the people who want to engage with debt advice to get the support that they need. So really really important for us that services are open to anyone who is seeking help. But like I said, we would expect community-based services to be thinking about targeting those who might struggle to engage with advice in other ways, and that we'd expect each grant holder to be articulating a strategy locally that they're able to then monitor against. The starting point for that would be the debt needs survey, which is an annual thing that MAPS conducts, and it can give you some insight into the, you know, the different needs that people have got. Then we'd expect some kind of application of local knowledge, understanding where local supply is, where good ways to reach clients can be achieved, and some understanding of your local demographics as well. So, you know, essentially we're sort of saying we're quite broad. We know there's a lot of need. We want you to tell us who and how you're going to target clients, and then we'll work with you to help you monitor that and deliver on your plans. Similarly linked were some questions around how to make sure that the needs of clients who might need more support from the debt advice process can be met. And again, you know, apologies if this is a little repetitive, but we're saying, you know, we'll make that part of your proposal. If you're going to be targeting and working with clients who you think need more time, then design your service to meet the needs of those clients. In terms of support, MAPS currently funds translation support, which is available for the community-based services that we fund. Our intention is that we're going to continue doing that. It's an area we're looking at the moment. We're looking at the supply that we have in place, and we will be running a commissioning exercise for that translation service. So if you do have any sorts of feedback, there is a place that you can share your thoughts on that. Again, keep an eye out or ask us if you want more information. But absolutely, you know, we are looking for your ideas and your expertise in your proposals to make sure that the issues you are, the clients you're supporting are facing, are being met. And then a couple of questions we got about how to design services that are reaching diverse ethnic communities or faith-based or digitally excluded groups. Again, no magic perfect answer on this. In the MAP standards, you know, there is some important stuff about, you know, making sure your services do have a kind of service design approach. Co-design we know is a really useful tool. And when you're thinking about that question about what support MAPS can give you, maybe this is one of the areas that you might want to tell us you want some more support on. I've referenced a couple of, I've put in some pictures of a couple of bits of research and evidence, which I thought it might be worth sharing. Some interesting co-design work that was done last summer, looking at co-design with diverse ethnic communities in London. Some really interesting insight there about developing culturally relevant and inclusive services. And the other bit of research I've put a picture of is some GLA funded work in London. They've been trying to sort of make sure that advice is reaching new and different clients, and they've been doing that through outreach, through working through different community settings, and some really good results about how that approach is bringing a different client base into advice seeking, and particularly clients who had never sought advice before. So no magic answers on this, but absolutely it's something that we want and expect to see. It might not be something that you're kind of doing on day one. It might be something that you want to work on through the lifetime of your grant. So it might be that you want to understand who is using the service currently, and then work on that strategy to reach communities and groups who you'd like to be accessing your support but aren't at the moment. Excellent. So the next bit, just back one slide, was about place-based services. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about, you know, where services are available from, familiar locations, trusted networks, all of these kind of things. It links a little bit to the point that we were just making, but, you know, this idea of you know, a really important factor of your design is where your service is available from, what those partnerships and networks are looking like, to try and make sure that you are targeting the clients that you want to reach. So I'll move us on to the questions. We got some questions about geography. Now, as Erica has mentioned, we set out last week our sort of high-level approach to geography, as in how the lotting structure for the grant scheme is going to be set out, which is those 15 local grants, mix of regional and sub-regional. Within those grants, that question of how services are best distributed within that grant area. This again is one of the areas that we'll expect lead grants and their delivery partners to be looking at and making part of their strategy for delivering services. So how you're going to prioritize coverage within the area, how you want to work to you know, to use your resources as effectively as possible is something we'll be looking for within your proposal. It's also worth noting, obviously, you know, we have a significant budget for community-based debt advice, but it is not, you know, a budget that enables community debt advice to be in all locations, everywhere, all of the time. So, there's going to have to be some prioritization within the budget that is available within a grant area. I'm really keen to understand those ideas and approaches as part of your proposals. Got some questions about how to evidence local knowledge. And I'll say again that we're going to be having some sessions coming up that'll look more at the grant application process. What putting together a good application might look like and involve. But on this question of sort of local reach and local knowledge, I think what we really wanted to sort of say, there's no magic formula. We're not looking for a certain number of outreach locations or referral partners, and it might not always be that more is better. This might be about sort of really doing some targeted work in certain areas. If you're thinking about outreach, actually covering a large rural area might be better supported by working really effectively with partners rather than having outreach locations with advisors dotted around in multiple areas. So, there's no magic answer. Really keen for your proposals, and we expect this to be an area that gets iterated over time. Technologies change things a lot, but again, we know the value of like being on the ground, having those relationships, those trusted partnerships that help people get into support effectively. We also got some questions that I think is relevant to this kind of idea of place-based services about, clients who really struggle to leave their homes, or potentially ways of working with remote debt advisors. Again, really keen to explore some ideas in this area. We want to make sure that the services are client-centered, supportive. So, if that involves, if you want to work in a way that involves home visits, or if you want to work in a way that kind of capitalizes on trusted relationships, maybe working with organizations who are providing a high level of support to clients already and finding ways to work with them to deliver advice effectively. That's something we're really keen on exploring. And it's something, again, we expect will iterate over the lifetime of the grant. So yeah, lots of different ideas out there and different ways of working with clients. So our third section that we gave some examples was about integration with local services. And again, this is one of the areas that we know is a real strong point of community-based services, those local connections, effective referrals in and out of services, and that kind of local knowledge and relationships, knowing the name of somebody in the local council to talk to about your council tax debts, or knowing the name of somebody in a service to refer people into that sort of strength of wider advice support, utilizing that local knowledge. Really important and special and unique bit of community-based services. So it's also an area where we recognize services are not the same across England, and we want to make sure that we are not creating an environment where people are kind of penalised for the wider funding environment for services locally to them. We know there's a lot of uncertainty in advice funding at the moment as well. So let's move us on to the questions. So we got some questions about funding and how funding will recognise the importance of referral pathways and outreach work. And again, I'm going to say we think this is a really important part of what community-based services are doing. And we know that the time and effort and energy that it takes to build those relationships with other services and make if referrals in and out work really well, it doesn't just happen. It's not cost neutral. as I mentioned, we also know that there isn't the same mix of services everywhere. You might have a really excellent welfare benefits team that you can refer in one area. In the next local authority area, that service may not exist in the same way. So we recognise there's going to need to be an element of diversity and flexibility within this. Absolutely, as we've said before, the primary focus of this fund is on delivering debt advice, but we're really open to proposals that are looking at how you deliver debt advice effectively, and what might need, what's sort of around the edges of a kind of core debt advice service might need funding to deliver a really effective service. So again, this is the area that we're looking for your thoughts and your ideas to be part of the proposal. Very similar kind of question about how first point of contact and wraparound support will be funded. So again, focuses on delivering debt advice, but we understand that you need an infrastructure, ways of working, processes around that to make that happen effectively. Got some questions about the expected outcomes around referrals and non-debt services. So again, I'm going to recommend the evidence and data deep dive that's coming up in December, but kind of reiterate the focus here is around debt advice. So, you're not going to be held on account for the effectiveness of other advice services or even the availability of other advice services. So that's hopefully kind of reassuring. And again, it's an area I'm sure will kick the tires on a little bit more at the data and evidence session that is coming up. And then a question around, kind of showcasing good examples of where debt is integrated well with other services. And what I'd say here is that we know that there's lots and lots of good examples happening on the ground, both within the services that MAPS funds and in other community-based services and other advice services. We're going to be having an evaluation and learning partner supporting grant holders through this process. And so we want to really develop a good culture of learning and sharing throughout the lifetime of the programme. And, we know that there are some really good ideas and examples out there happening at the moment where people are using their debt service to link in with services that are really trying to build resilience for clients and look at some of the issues that might be contributing to kind of systemic debt issues and debt problems. So linking people in with employment support, with housing support, working on people's social confidence. So lots of really good examples out there that we want to get a lot more focus on as we move into the new grant scheme, and really keen to understand your ideas as part of the proposals. The next section that we looked at was around flexible channel delivery. So this idea of having a journey through advice that enables people to pick the channels that are right for them and support them in a really effective way. Now, within this, we've said that we expect there to be options for in-person support throughout the client journey. But again, we're expecting a level of diversity of approach and tailoring it within the service. So I'm going to move us on to the questions for this one. And we got quite a few questions asking us about that channel mix and channel requirements. Is there an expected percentage? Things like that. So again, what I'm going to say is we're not expecting or anticipating putting out any kind of percentages or targets to work to. I think anytime things like that happen, they tend to sort of become a target if someone suggests a percentage. And what we're really interested in is services that are flexible, services that let clients access support in a way that works for them. And just to sort of reiterate, what we do find from the research and the outcome, customer satisfaction and the outcomes data that we look at and see currently is that clients feel they do have a good level of choice. People feel that the support they get, the channel mix they get, is generally working for them. So we're not going to be setting any kind of expectations about proportions, and we expect that there may be some differences within a grant. If your grant area covers areas that are, highly rural as well as highly urban, you're going to be able to potentially adopt different models to support people within that. And what you see in one area might be different from what you see in another. Having said that, and as I mentioned on the previous slide, in-person support we think is really important. And I thought it might be just useful to clarify that phrase. So when we're talking about in-person, we are talking about, essentially kind of being in the same room as somebody as part of the advice giving process. What that room is, we're pretty neutral on. It could be, as we said previously, home visits, could be drop-in sessions, it could be appointments in your premises, it could be meeting clients on a third-party premises, it could be remote debt advice, but with somebody who is part of the service in person, they're supporting people as part of that advice giving process. These are the kind of decisions I'm sure most of you who are involved in delivering services, you're making these choices and these decisions every day with the clients that you're working with, and we want and expect that client-centered local knowledge to be applied going forward. We got some questions as well about the balance between digital and in-person, and how we want to sort of balance needs with areas of high digital exclusion. So again, tell us about this as part of your proposals. We absolutely are wanting technology to be an enabler for advice giving where that's appropriate. But the idea that you're forcing a client into a journey that is not appropriate or not suitable for them is isn't really in line with what is set out in the standards. So whilst we're expecting, and interested and open to how you want to use digital and tech to support your service delivery, I think it's really important to say, we're talking about flexible channels, we're talking about different ways of delivering things. This is a community-based debt advice grant scheme, and we're expecting, that kind of advisor-led advice to be really significant part of the service offering. So if you gave us a proposal that said, we want to invest all the money in building a totally end-to-end digital journey for customers, I'm not sure that is quite going to meet the aims of a community-based service. So that's our sort of position there. Hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, we got a question on this one that was about our current channel mix, if you like. And so we've just put the recent stats from our current community-based funded services there. So this is what people are reporting to us as their main advice channel. So flexibility within that as well. Some people, as I'm sure you can imagine, will sometimes be moving through different channels within that. But there's the kind of numbers for those who are interested. You'll be really pleased that in a moment I'm gonna invite another colleague to talk, and you can listen to somebody else's voice for a little bit. But I'm just going to explain this example that we gave you first. So we framed this very much in terms of making advice giving easier. So it's talking about ideas around continuous improvement, looking at the processes and the technology that you have in place to support advice giving for your clients and for the advisors and the wider workforce involved in that. And because this is a little bit more in the tech space, I'm going to invite my colleague Daniel to join the call and talk us through some of the ideas and questions and examples that we received.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Hi, folks. My name is Daniel Kelly. I'm the Senior Debt Advice Development Manager here at Money and Pension Service. So yeah, I want to talk to you about continuous improvement, in particular, sort of the technology investment aspects of this. So really what we're asking from you in terms of the service design in this area is we want to make sure that we're identifying and implementing ways to make debt advice easier for clients, but also the advisors who are working on the front lines. And primarily we see that through technology investments and process improvement. So for what we are looking for is grant holders who are going to work with the supply chain to really dig up and find all those obstacles, those points of pain that people experience as they're trying to get their work done and those areas that really hinder customer satisfaction, as well as things where there's sort of wasted effort. You know, you're taking data from one system and you're having to copy and paste that into another, and all these sort of steps that just slow down the process unnecessarily. So this is the sort of thing that we're looking at, and we want to see a development of a culture of continuous improvements through these grant systems. So we want that to be based on data around customers and their journeys. Where are they dropping out? Where are customers struggling to access a service in the way that they want to? And alongside that, building that with feedback from clients directly and doing co-design work as you're making change. So building change with advisors, bringing in the voice of the client from the very start as you're starting to develop that work to make sure that these changes that you're building work for them, work for the clients, work for the frontline advisors. A really crucial part of this is the grant holder working with the wider supply chain to support technology infrastructure, to make sure that the advisor, most crucially, is equipped with the tools, the systems that they need in order to do their job well and to do it efficiently. So that could include case recording systems, case management platforms, confirmation of advice processes, additional technology for accessibility needs as well. So we think this is for the grant holder to really work with the supply chain to understand their needs and make sure that that's coordinated and that's being utilized. That does mean that because some of these areas, there might be different needs and different subgrantees within that might have different systems. It will require some coordination as well. But the really key thing I just want to stress is that as a grant holder, you sort of need to be building continuous improvement into the service design, building that capacity, that capability, that culture of learning, improving, and working together to make sure that your systems are improving and you're developing better and better services through the term of this grant. Now, a few of the questions that you've asked here. So, how innovative processes will be assessed in the grants process and examples of the type of innovation MAPS wishes to encourage. So we will have more on the application process and the strict criteria in early 2026. But again, our primary focus are really on developments that make the advice giving process easier for customers, their clients, and for your workforce. And it's about developing that culture of continuous improvement throughout the supply chain. Okay, great. Second one here, it'd be helpful to understand more about the technology-based solutions in the service design. So in this space, we're not expecting to set out what we see as detailed technology specifications and what you need to check off. Different organizations are going to have different requirements, and will also be at different stages and have different systems already in place that will need different approaches in order to update and move forward. So we're looking as part of the process for you to say in your proposal, how will you coordinate technology investments to make sure that organizations in your supply chain can make sure that their systems are being brought up to date and well maintained. efficient working and digital transformation. So when we're looking at this area, we do want you to share your expertise in the proposal. So how will you put in place the measures, the systems to understand where in the supply chain, where in the services are things not working as well as they should be? Where in your processes are you identifying that things are getting slowed down? So it's really, we're looking for you to share your expertise around how you're going to sort of arrive at this way of efficient working and build this culture of continuous improvement. So digital transformation isn't necessarily the goal, but what we are looking for here are services that are using tech effectively. So services that provide the advisor workforce really with the tools, the systems, and the skills and the training to make sure that they can bring the best service to the customers. So bringing services up to date, the IT infrastructure systems up to date, and maintaining them. This doesn't have to be a rapid shift, doesn't need to be straight from day one. This will be progressive, but we want to see that culture begin from the very beginning. One question here. We also want to know what innovation means. This is an exhausting phrase to hear when small charities are working incredibly hard to deliver accessibly to people who just need face-to-face help and who aren't digitally capable. And as someone who works in this space, I also get a bit exhausted with the phrase innovation and what do we mean in different contexts. I think the first thing to say here is, especially for those who aren't digitally capable, we are not suggesting that customers or clients are being pushed into journeys that aren't suitable for them. Different clients are going to have different needs and different accessibility requirements, and that will include customers who are digitally excluded. And that's really, really crucial to make sure that your service can flex and support customers who are digitally excluded, but also taking care of other accessibility needs. So a customer is perhaps housebound, but very confident with the phone, or other sort of situations like that. Different customers need that different approach, and we're looking for you to find ways that your service could be more flexible and open to these different channels and different ways of supporting the client. And that's really the core thing, making sure that in your proposal, you're showing how you're adopting a client-centered and tailored approach. So giving customers different options as they're going through the journey in order to connect with your service. And I think the really key thing that I really want to point out here is a lot of the time when people are thinking about technology or use words like innovation, the mind instantly jumps to these digital journeys that the customer, where they connect in their open banking and they're talking with an AI chatbot and all the rest of it. Actually, I really want to encourage you to think more about what are the equipment, the systems that your advisors need when they're, so that they can operate well. Even if you have a completely digitally excluded customer base, the tools that the advisors require will still often be technology based. Focus on infrastructure, case management systems, having those omni-channel capabilities so you don't have a separate email system where you're having to copy and paste the information over and things like that, and data getting lost in that process. Having that data storage and analysis capability, making sure that you're actually learning from what's happening with your customers and looking at ways that you can improve your service from there. So don't just focus and think on how can our service be more digital or digital to customers, but focus on what are the tools and systems that our advisors really need in order to deliver the best service moving forward. And then a final question here. Consider how service design can meet the needs of digitally excluded group, including older people, people with disabilities, and those in rural areas. Again, we think it is absolutely vital that in your service design work, you've considered digitally excluded customers. And what would your service look like to a customer that just has zero digital capabilities? What that looks like will vary by different area, and we're really looking to you to consider how best to deliver services to that customer group. We're really open to ideas and trying new ways of working. But again, we'd always encourage you to think about the wide array of different vulnerabilities and the different ways that different vulnerable circumstances can interact with how those customers want to engage with your service. It's about providing the customer with a multitude of options so that as they're going through that journey, they can choose which option, which way of communicating with you works for them best. And appreciating that different customers are going to have different needs as they enter through that journey, as well as different areas are going to have different requirements. I think it's very true that in rural areas, we're going to see higher levels of digital exclusion and an older demographic. In inner city urban areas, we're going to see a different sort of approach. And that's why we really value going through a grants process so that we can really work with you to make sure that your services are delivering to your customers in your local area, rather than just taking a broad brush approach across the UK, across England. So I think that's everything from me. So I'm going to pass you back to Fiona.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, so just to kind of iterate there, you know, when we're talking about making advice giving easier, sometimes as well, it might not be about tech, it might be about processes, it might be about ways of working. You know, you might find that, you know, different partners that you're working with as part of your referral network, you're getting some processes working really well and others not so. So all of that thinking about how to make advice giving easier, you know, don't just think of it as like we have to move to digital, it's all about tech. It's absolutely not that. So the final area we gave you some examples on were around this idea of workforce well-being. And when we talk about workforce well-being, we are talking about making sure that your workforce have the right recruitment and onboarding approach, they've been trained appropriately, that the career is attractive, and they've got the appropriate support and well-being in place for their roles. And again, we're recognizing that there's going to be some diversity within your supply chain, but are looking for grant leads to create a strong culture of support and well-being throughout the network that they are looking after. So the questions that we got in this area, some of the questions we got were around what roles we expect to be in place within delivery teams. And so, you know, on this, I'd say, well, I'll say first, obviously, it's a debt delivery program, so we're expecting that to be a significant focus. But what wider supporting roles and how you structure the team, we're really open to your proposals on if you're interested or think that actually investing in that partnership side and the relationship side is really important. You know, build that into your model for what you want to do. Linked to that, I think it's really important to say we've got no fixed idea about, you know, what should be insourced and what should be outsourced. So if you're looking, for example, maybe at the way you're going to manage quality through the grant, maybe this is an area where you think, well, we'll have some first line supervision in-house, but actually we're going to work with a different partner who we will outsource some of that second tier, third tier level of checking and supervision. Yeah. You might also, thinking about what Daniel was just talking about, some of that technology, that might be some of the areas that you're looking at something that's a bit more outsourced. So again, open to ideas and proposals, but we want to, you know, make sure that you've got an appropriate team for the service design and the strategy that you want to implement. And through the application process, you know, and that dialogue process, this may be one of the areas that we work through. Also got a slightly more technical question about you know, different levels of advice and information, what's MAPS, what's FCA requirements, and a sort of subpart of that question about whether volunteers could be and trainees can be part of the process. So as I've mentioned previously, debt advice, it's you know, regulated activity. It's authorised by the FCA, and so they are, you know, they've set out a definition of that. You know, PERG is the guidance about, you know, sort of the boundaries of advice, and PERG 17 is where you find everything around debt advice. That's also reflected in the MAP standards. Kelly and Catherine will be running a session looking at the kind of customer experience deep dive later in the week. It'll also be looking at quality. One of the things I'm sure they'll be mentioning on that call is the MAP's debt advice quality framework. Now, this framework exists already. It's out there, and we can put a link in the chat. But this sets out the minimum training that is required for any individual involved in any of the kind of activities around the advice giving process. So on that question of trainees and volunteers, there absolutely can be a role for volunteers and trainees within that client-facing advice provision work, as long as they are meeting those minimum training requirements that are set out in that quality framework. And there's also obviously roles that volunteers can be involved in that isn't in that direct to client advice giving process. Across all of your workforce, what we're interested in is that roles are appropriately supported, they've got the right onboarding, and they've got the right training. So next slide, please. Some final kind of questions and comments that we got. One looking at, recognizing service design must also be looking at your workforce and the well-being of people. And absolutely, that's why when we're talking about service design, we're talking about clients, processes, and people. So the way that you kind of design the job is a really important factor. We know that making sure people are supported is going to help the clients that you are targeting get the best possible service. It's also, we know from some of the work we've done on advisor wellbeing, that management support is a really important factor as well. So people who feel like they've got support from their manager generally have better well-being than the members of the workforce who don't feel like they're getting that support. So we're really interested in those resilient, well-built teams. It's certainly an issue that came up a lot when we were out meeting a lot of you at the events over the summer. So again, thinking about how service design can ensure resilience in the workforce. And we're really interested in how potentially across your partnership, across your grant area, you might want to take a bit more of a sort of coordinated approach to recruitment, to roles, to development within that partnership. And I know certainly it was in some of the areas where we're talking about having sub-regional grants. I know that a lot of people said actually they thought having those sub-regional grant holders come together and think about a workforce strategy across the region might be a really useful and helpful thing to happen as well. So again, this is something maybe that we will be picking up through the lifetime of the grants, and might be something that comes out with our learning and evaluation partner as we work through things. But again, really keen to see proposals that are putting the workforce at the heart of what you're doing.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
So that is the 6 examples that we gave you. I'm going to move us on now to a little question, hopefully a little bit of interaction. So hopefully you're all familiar with Slido. It's a place where we can do a quick poll and we can see the results that are coming in. So you could either scan that QR code, or you can just type into your browser slido.com, and then you can add this code. So I'll pause for a little bit whilst you do that. If the prospect of listening to my dulcet tones for the last hour has not put you all in a stupor. So we'll bring up the thing there. So the question we're asking for your thoughts on which, think about this service design approach, which areas do you think MAPS could provide support on? Is it, do you want some help from us on better understanding the need data that we have? Is there some support that we could provide for you around co-design? You know, could we be sort of putting on sessions that help you work on capacity and capabilities? Tamsin, if you bring the slides down, I'm going to bring up the Slido so we can see what people are putting in. So lovely. Okay, great. We'll let you do this for a little bit longer. We're obviously looking at how we work with people between now and the grant competition opening, but we're also thinking about how we're going to be working through that mobilization phase, and also thinking about what support we might need, we might want to work in partnership with grant holders on through the lifetime of the grant. So you know, hopefully that message has come across you know, today, that we are seeing service design as kind of part of a process. We know there's lots of change that's going to be going on, new grant areas, new grant leads. So, you know, as Daniel said, having everything in place and shiny and new from day one, probably when in an environment of lots of change, isn't necessarily the best way. So we recognize that this is something that's going to evolve, that we want to work in partnership with you and support you as grant leads and delivery partners throughout the lifetime of the grant. Okay, I've got a couple more people are typing, but yeah, some really interesting stuff coming up and useful to see. So as Erica mentioned at the beginning, that kind of partnership building, working with the supply chain, that might be something that's sort of a little bit more focused initially. Lots coming out on quality again. So that session happening on Thursday this week on the quality session, I think we'll go into some of that in a little bit more detail, but really interesting to see some of the areas that you're looking for support from us on. So yeah, around that kind of data, potentially some of the stuff around the tech, a little plug for the tech forum that Daniel runs, that is sharing some of the ideas from the debt modernization fund and some of the, you know, ways of working that are emerging from that. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing the Slido now, but we'll feel free to keep chatting in there. And we were gonna move on to some questions. So I'll turn to Erica to see if there was anything in the chat.
Thanks, Fee. So we haven't got any questions that have appeared in the chat during the course of the meeting, but I'm going to welcome anybody who wants to raise their hand, come on screen and kind of share a question with us at this point. I'd also be really interested in any kind of comments, reflections on what people have heard today. And if anybody has put something into that Slido that they'd like to just kind of give us a little bit more detail on, like comments like tech, continuous improvement, if you'd like to come on screen and kind of just give us a little bit more about what would be really helpful for you, that will help us to kind of make sure that we are providing the support in the way that's most helpful. So have we pressed that button, Fee, that allows people to kind of
yeah, I've switched
Super.
on cameras and mics, so people should be able to pop their hand up or again pop something in the chat.
Joanne, we'll welcome you first. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I suppose it's a bit regarding the tech aspect. So the client confirmation of advice letter takes us advisors a seriously long time to complete. So any tech innovation to help reduce that. And also from an organisation that supports clients with British Sign Language, obviously for our deaf clients, they wouldn't be able to read a confirmation of advice letter. So just, yeah.
not sure who wants to take that one. Daniel,
Yeah, I can take that on. So just in terms of a couple of things around confirmation of advice, I think one, there are some interesting technologies that are emerging, but I would say are still needing of development, which sort of translate some of the unstructured transcripts of an advice session or additional notes and can transform that into confirmation of advice letters. That's still very much emerging technology, but obviously because we're looking at grants that are going to be lasting for a long, long time into the future, some of that might be more confirmed in the future and become more widespread utilized. So there is some tech in this space, but I would also point to, actually, it's not just the technology, it's also about thinking about how the communications operate from the customer perspective. So reworking the confirmation of advice using behavioral insights and thinking about, okay, how much can the customer reasonably ingest of all the information we're providing them, and breaking down that letter into more simplified structures. So sort of putting the most key information on the front page and designing that confirmation of advice letter so the most important information stands out more clearly, and the other still important but perhaps not as relevant in the immediate term information can then be provided near the end and not be as prominent. So thinking about how the confirmation of advice letter is designed, not just from a technology perspective, but from that behavioral insights, and working with customers to go, okay, letter A, letter B, which one makes more sense to you? How much can you understand from each? I think could be really helpful in developing the service and developing the confirmation of advice process.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. Question from Bev, I can see in the chat, which is asking about what happens to providers during 26-27, where this isn't being rolled out until spring 27. So just to say that the first round of grants won't go live until April 28, and it'll be April 29 for the second round of grant competition. But we expect to continue the current grant funding that is in place with existing providers in those areas until such time as the new grants are in place. So we will be talking to current funded organisations where they are impacted by that, but the expectation is that there will be kind of no change in terms of the current provider footprints, but making sure that, you know, we are preparing the ground as far as we can for the new services that are to come. So broadly, expect still the same. Hopefully that answers your question, Bev. Please do feel free to come back if there's anything else.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions or comments, Alice?
I don't know if this is within the scope, but I am still finding that the MAP standards and the way they're sort of translated into how we practically give advice and what we write up in our notes is a huge strain for advisors who are taking hours and hours to write them up. So, you know, is there any scope for sort of overhauling things like we've got I think there's a part of it that says that we have to offer help to fill out forms and get help with Money Helper and do benefits checks and signpost to services. And on that last one, we're particularly getting things like people being marked down because they didn't signpost someone to a stop smoking service or something like that. It's so fluid, like you could do loads on it, but the advisors, I mean, I trust my advisors to kind of know when there is an issue there and say, I signposted this person to this service because it was needed, rather than sort of try and cover everything. And do you see what I mean? So is there any chance of these things being a little bit rewritten? And just to say, the benefits checks, of course, we always do those anyway. I mean, we do those ourselves, but there's some parts of the sort of offer of help that, you know, form filling, does that mean we've got to go and do PIP forms? It's a bit vague, and I think advisors stumble over it, and it's causing problems.
just to kind of flag that Kelly's come on screen, but I'm going to give the quick plug now for the deep dive session that's looking at customer experience and quality on Thursday for anybody who hasn't registered or already. But I'm very happy to kind of let Kelly give an initial answer and to come in and cover any other points at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Erica, and thanks for your question, Alice. So as I outlined earlier, there have been some changes to the MAP standards, which I'm sure that you have seen. And what we're doing at the moment is developing those detailed toolkits, and those toolkits will set out the minimum expectations against all of those standards. And I think what it is important to say is that, you know, depending on what the client presents with, is kind of what the outcome is needed to be. And, you know, debt advisors are very capable and able of following that process through. And the standards that focus specifically on advice giving are very much linked to the expectations as set out in regulation by the FCA. So keep an eye out, if you haven't already, for those new MAP standards and the toolkits when they land as well. Hopefully they will kind of help outline the expectations.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And again, a lot more chance to kind of discuss that sort of feedback on Thursday. It's quite an interactive session. I know that quality colleagues have got planned. One linked question, just in case, before we come to you, Emma, there is a question around whether file reviews and IFRs will still be required or something similar. Kelly, I don't know if you want to answer that, but I think my understanding is that broadly the quality systems that you set up will be for you to kind of prescribe, as long as they are in line with the MAP standards. But yeah, over to you, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Erica, and thanks for the question, Lindsay. So file reviews and IFRs are something that probably linked to kind of what your lead organisation expect and want from you at the moment. But yeah, going forward, just to outline exactly what Erica said, that is very much up for you to decide how you want to monitor and look at quality. And we definitely want to explore this a little bit further in the webinar that we've got on Thursday. There will be some really interactive areas for you to be able to tell us what you think could work well for your service, so we can understand a little bit about what your intentions might be.
And I'm going to come to a final quality question linked. Will the toolkit be shared directly with delivery partners when it's available, Kelly?
Yes, absolutely. As soon as the toolkits are done and ready to be shared, they will be on the debt quality website and the MAPS website, along with the updated MAP standards.
And we will make sure to disseminate those through our current lead grant holders as well. Emma, thank you for your patience.
That's okay. I've kind of forgotten what I was going to ask now, but I haven't really. I'm only joking.
Sorry.
It's all right. My question was really around, and this will probably unfold as we go on with this process, but looking at my advisors and kind of the mainstream, as it was called before, the kind of advice delivery is a lot more complex in obviously face-to-face situations. So I'm kind of want to look at the training side for the advisors to be able to help them cope. I think in some aspects it's worse and harder face-to-face than it is on the phone sometimes. So I'm kind of looking at trauma-informed courses and training and resilience and building that up into, you know, what we're looking at to keep our advisors safe. And I'm just wondering if there's something that you guys are going to incorporate that might support that, whether that's going to be built into the funding model and the FTE price.
So I'm happy to again give a plug for the session on Thursday, which is going to talk about some of the training requirements and kind of how that might work through, Emma. But I think as we've gone around and done our market engagement over the course of the summer, we have heard from quite a lot of providers who are thinking along similar lines to yourself, making sure that kind of potentially there's clinical supervision involved, or training that is going to help people to be equipped to deal with some of the difficult circumstances that they're dealing with. What we're not going to do is kind of provide a dictated cost model that says that this is what a unit cost looks like. That unit cost will be very much for you to build based on the things that you need to deliver the service the type of service that you want to deliver. So we recognise that will be different in different places. If you are dealing with a specific cohort of clients, it might be that clinical supervision is a must for a particular group of advisors, but not so much for the kind of advisors who are dealing with the less complex cases or the less complex clients. So we are open to you building a model that looks different for different parts of your overall service. So I hope that's helpful. It's not as prescriptive as perhaps you were hoping for, but I hope what we're trying to do is to give you the flexibility to do the thing that you think is right, and kind of we'll ask you to tell us why this is the approach that you're taking, but we're not going to be prescriptive.
Absolutely, I understand. Thank you.
I hope that's helpful. There's a couple of other kind of notes in the chat. I did just see a hand go up and then come down. Julie?
Yeah, sorry, I was having tech problems there.
That's all right.
I don't know if this is a question or an observation, but just thinking about how, as you've just said, non-prescriptive you're being and very open to us telling you how we want to design services and deliver them. I'm just thinking about how I suppose I'm concerned about how much difference there might be across different regions and sub-regions, and how much duplication of work that might have. Potentially one quality system in one region and a completely different one in a different region. Is there going to be opportunities for cross-regional working facilitated by MAPS? Or
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So we are very much open to seeing kind of different approaches, because those different approaches might throw up things which demonstrate something's working particularly well, but there will be fora for best practice sharing and kind of what works, lessons learned from each other across the scheme. So we are putting in place a learning and evaluation partner who will work with grant holders and organisations, but also with us at MAPS to make sure that we are kind of taking the best from what we see in different regions. I think this is part of the openness to kind of this iterative approach, innovation in different places, that we will be learning with you at the same time. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting journey to go on, but we're kind of quite excited for it, because we think that there are some really good ideas and innovation out there. Alice, I'm really sorry, I'm going to cut you off at this stage, because we've just got a couple more slides. I just want to round up before we kind of come to the end of this, but just to kind of take away our key messages from today. Wait for those slides to reappear. But we've got 3 things that I think we really want you to take away from today. It's about having the opportunity for you to use your expertise to shape the services that you want to provide that respond to your local communities. We are not expecting overnight transformation. We're really wanting to make sure that you are doing this on a kind of planned basis. So we are prepared for you to kind of tell us how you expect to see your services develop over time. And that key message there about telling us what you want and need from us to build really effective services. And I know there's quite a few questions today that have come up that are related to that training session. So on the next slide, we have just got that kind of summary of the further sessions which are taking place. So the customer experience and quality deep dive on the 6th of November, service mobilisation that is covering all things like employment transition, TUPE, finance for service mobilisation, and then a data and evidence deep dive on the 4th of December. So if you've got anything that you want to kind of feedback after what you've heard today, please do use that commercial@maps.org.uk mailbox. Anything else that you see will be posted up on our website, including the videos from today's session, and the materials will come out as part of the email letting you know that that survey has been uploaded. So really it's just to say thank you. We are bang on time, and apologies if we haven't got to your questions. We will kind of review them and try and make sure that we do some sort of mop up at the end. I hope it's been a helpful session. Thank you for your time and have a good day.